All right, welcome to part 3 of the skill tree tutorial. So we'll just continue right where we left off here. So let's just right click and go to user interface and create a new widget blueprint. So these are the last two widgets we're going to be creating actually. So we're getting close to being finished here. And then we will call this skill array widget. And then we want one more. So right click, user interface, and we'll just call this skill widget. All right, so back here in our skill tree widget, the one we were working on before, um, or actually, let's make the other widgets first. Yeah, so let's open up the skill array widget and we'll modify this one first. So let's see. So this one's going to be pretty simple. We want to delete this canvas panel and we want to add a vertical box. So drag on a vertical box. And then inside of here, we want to add text. So drag in a text. And then for the text, we want to set it to centered, like so. And then this is going to be essentially the category. And then everything below it is going to be added to this vertical box. So the idea is that the text will be at the top, and then all of the different skills that are in this category will just populate like here, 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 and they'll just keep going down. So let's go over to the graph real quick because we need to get access to a couple things. So over here on the left, we want to add a variable so we can have a reference to the skill tree component. So say skill tree component. And we want this to be of type skill tree component, obviously, like so. And we want to set this guy to be blueprint read only, instance editable, expose on spawn, and private. So that way we can modify it whenever we create an instance of this widget. And then we also want to specify, we also want to have a variable for the category. And I believe that's it. So add one more and call it category. And this one is also going to be all of these things, except this time it's going to be a string. And then we did actually forget to do one thing. We want to come back here to the designer tab and we want to select this vertical box. And we want to say is a variable because we're going to need to access it through blueprints. And we can just call this the skill vertical box. So let's select this text block up here at the top. And then we want to bind this to the category that we just created. So that way it will show the category. And then let's go back to our skill tree widget and then go to the graph tab. And then in the event graph, we can actually just delete all this stuff. So the idea here is that we want to populate this skill tree widget with all of the different categories. So we can do that on initialize. So we'll say event on initialized. And then we actually need a delay node here. So if you hold down D and left click, it'll create a delay node. And we actually can just pass in 0 here because this is just the way Unreal works. I don't know why, but whenever the event on initialize is called, it needs to wait one more frame before you get access to any variables that are passed in via the expose on spawn method. So if we just wait one frame, it will be faster than you can actually see, but we'll have access to these variables. So we'll do that, and then we can drag in our skill tree component, and we want to get all the categories from it. So we need a way to do that real quick. So let's go back to our skill tree component, and we just want to add a function. So we'll say function, and we'll call it get categories. And so what this function is going to do is pretty straightforward. We want to drag in our root, and so the categories are our keys. So we can say get, or I think it's just keys, yeah, keys, like so. And that returns an array of all the keys. So we just want to take this and return this. Pretty straightforward. And we can just mark this function as const since it's not changing anything. And so now I can come back here to our skill tree widget. And we can say get categories. And so for each category, we want to create a new skill array widget. So let's see. So let's say for each loop. So we want to loop over all the categories, and we want to say create widget. Oops, create widget. And the widget we want to create is our skill array widget. And then for the owning player, we can say get owning player. The skill tree component, we can just pass in our reference to the skill tree component. And the category is just this category here. And then we want to add that to our skill array horizontal box, because you remember we have this horizontal box, which is here. And so we want to add each category to this box so that they populate. So we can drag in our skill array horizontal box and say add child. And the child we want to add is, of course, this guy, like so. And then let's see. One thing we should probably do here, because if we just run this real quick, let me just show you something. And we press the P button to open it. Well, something's kind of working, but if I press left click, you can see it fires, which you don't really want that. And the reason that's happening is because our input is still being captured by the game and not the UI. And so in order to get it to be captured by the UI, we just have to override the mouse down event. So we'll just do that real quick since we're here. So hit the overrides, and we want to override on mouse button down. And we also want to override on mouse button double click. And the reason we need to do both is because like when you double click the mouse, it technically calls a different function than when you just click the mouse once. But we basically want to override any clicking. So we need to override both. And we just want to return handled here. So if you drag off this and say handled, we're basically just telling it that, hey, we handled the click, don't worry about it. And then we want to do that in both of them. So make sure you do that in both of them. And so now if we run this again and we open up and we click, oops, I clicked too much. And we click around, you can see it doesn't actually fire our gun anymore, but it will still allow us to click on these buttons here once we get them showing up. And you can kind of already see here, it is showing our category, but it's not showing the actual buttons yet because we haven't actually made them, or the actual skills yet because we haven't actually made them. And it's also showing over here on the left, which we don't want. So let's go back to our designer tab, and we want to set this to centered, I think. And maybe top as well. Let's set it to center and top, I think is what I had it at before. And if we play and we press P, you can see in there we have agility. So once we get it finished, we'll have our two skills right here below agility. And if you were to add more, then it would kind of scoot to the left and the other category would add right here to the right of it. Okay, so it seems like it's working pretty well so far. So let's see, what is the next step here? So I think the next step is actually making the buttons where we can actually buy stuff. So let's go to our skill array widget, and then we want to go to the graph tab. And then inside of here, we want to kind of do something similar to what we just did inside the initialize. So let's delete all this stuff, and we can right click and say event on initialized. And then we want to add a delay node. So hold down D, left click to create a delay node. And again, we're doing this for the same reason. Set the time to 0, just so we can get access to these guys right here in the initialize. And so this time, what we want to do is we want to get all of these skills that are inside of the category that we represent. So to do that, we can drag in our skill tree component. And we need a function that returns to us basically what I just said, a function that returns to us all of these skills inside of a specific category. So let's go to our skill tree component and just write that function real quick. It'll be pretty straightforward. So again, we'll just add a function and we'll call it get skill array. And so the input needs to take in the category. So we'll add a string and make sure you make it single. And we will call this the category name. And so we want to drag in our root and say contains, because we want to first check if we contain this category, because obviously if we don't have a category that matches this name, then, well, we can't really do much. So we'll do a branch just to make sure that we have this category. And if we do have this category, which we should, then we can find that. So we'll copy this root again, and we'll say find. And we'll pass in our category name again, like so. And we want to return this value. So we can drag this back to here, and now I'll create an output pin, like so. And we will hook that up. But we also want to return whether or not we actually found something. So if we add another output and we change it to a Boolean, and we will call this found question mark, we can select it true here, and then we want to just copy this return node and paste it down here, and then we want to select false here. So we're basically saying, like, if we didn't find a category matching the one that they passed in, just go ahead and return like false, essentially, like we didn't actually find it. But if we did, then we will actually return the thing that we found, which is the array of skills, and we will return true for found because we actually found it. Okay, so then we can come back to, where were we? We were inside of skill array widget, I believe. Yeah, so inside of here, we can now call get skill array. Oh, and one thing we should do, we should make this constant as well because, well, it's not changing anything. So let's just come in here and select this guy and say const, just because we're good programmers, right? And then we go back to the skill array, hook this up. So the category name is going to be the category name that's passed in. So we'll hook that up. And then we want to make sure that we actually found something. So we'll do a branch. And so if we did find something, then we want to break, because again, this is an array, so we're going to say break. So this gets all the skills in that category, and we want to loop over each one of them, and we want to create a widget for it, and then we want to add that widget to our vertical box so that they all show up one underneath each other, right? So we'll say for each loop, hook this up to the true. We will say create skill, or create widget, hook that up, and we want this to be our skill widget. The owning player is just going to be get owning player. And we need to change this skill widget to take in the skill that it's representing. So if we hit this little magnifying glass here, it will bring us to our skill widget. We can open this up, and we'll fill out this designer tab in a second. But for right now, let's just go to the graph tab. And we want to add a variable on the left. So come over here to the left. And we want to add the skill. So just say skill and then change the type to BP skill. Because this is basically a reference to the skill that it represents, or that it's displaying. And then we want to set this to instance editable, blueprint only, expose on spawn, and private. And now that we've done that, we can come back to our skill array widget. And we can refresh this guy like so. And then we can just drag that in like that. And so now we are passing in the skill that it represents. And then finally, like I said before, the last thing we want to do is we want to add this guy to our skill vertical box, which if you remember, the vertical box is basically right here. So it's basically going to add it underneath the text. So we will just say skill vertical box, add child, hook that up, and hook that up. All right, so now the only thing, well, there's probably a little bit more that I'm not remembering, but the main thing we have to do now is fill out this designer. Oops, not this one. Fill out the skill widgets designer to display our skill. So let me open that up on my other monitor just so I can copy it and not mess up. Okay, so this is going to be pretty straightforward. So we can delete this canvas panel. First thing I want to add inside of here is a vertical box. And then at the top of the vertical box, we want to add in a spacer. And the reason we're doing this is so that there's a little bit of space in between each one of our skills. So we'll just add a spacer here at the top. And then we want to set the padding. It doesn't have to be very big. I think I set it to like 10 before on the Y, so we'll set 10. And then, oh, we should set this. So up here at the top, let's set this to custom on screen, just so we can view it. How we're going to be rendering it, because this thing's going to be a size of 200 by 200. So set it to 200 by 200. And so this is what it will kind of look like, you know, relative to the screen. So I have our spacer on top just to give it some space. And so the main part here is going to be underneath the spacer. So let's drag in a canvas panel onto our vertical box. And then for the canvas panel, we want to set it to, wait a minute. Oh yeah, so we want to set it to fill over here on the right. So that fills the whole thing. And then inside of here, we want to add a button so we can actually click it. So drag in a button. And then for this, we want to set it to fill. And then we want to zero out the right and the bottom offsets. And we want to hit size to content. I guess that's fine. We can check that. Let's see, let's scroll down and then under style and under normal, we want to change the tint of it. So under normal, we want to change the tint of it to be just totally alpha. So we'll just say 0, 0, 0, 0, because we don't want to actually see the button really. And then also inside of here, or inside of the button, we want to add a size box. So add a size box to the button. And then for this, we will set it to be width and a height override. And we will just set it to 200 by 200, just like we did up here. So we'll say 200 by 200. And then inside of the size box, we want to add a border just so we can have a nice background color. So we'll add a border. And then we want to get rid of this padding. I think it added padding somewhere else. So I'm going to move the size box. Yeah, we want to get rid of the padding on the size box too. That's why it's looking weird. I think there's also padding on this button. Hold on, let me look at this. Yeah, so the padding on this button, it's also just better if you just get rid of it. So just set the normal padding and the pressed padding, all of that to 0. And that will make it look a lot better when you press the button. Okay, so sorry. So back over here on the border, we want to set the brush color to like whatever color you want the background to be. I think I used, let me look. I used 0, 0, 0, and 0.75 for the opacity. So it's like just kind of a black color. And then inside of here, we want to add some text at the top for the name of the skill. We want to add an image, and we want to add the description. So we want to add another canvas panel inside of our border. And then we want to add text to the canvas panel. And we want the text to be aligned to the top like this. And we will say 0 all of this out, and then size to content. And we want to set the alignment on the X to 0.5, so that way it's centered. And then we want to change the font size, because obviously this is a little bit too big. So if you go to fonts, we can set this to like 16. And obviously you guys can modify this to look like however you want when you're finished. But I'm just kind of throwing something together here real quick, but feel free to change the design if you want. And then we also want to add an image. So we will add an image to our canvas panel. And then for this, we want it to be centered. So we will say centered. And then again, let's just 0 all this out. Or actually this one, the size we want it to be like 100 by 100. And then the alignment, we want 0.5 by 0.5. So that way it's centered. And so this is going to be our image. I think I set let me double check. I thought I had set the opacity of this. Maybe not. Might have to come back to that later. And then finally, we want to add the description. So text, drag that onto the canvas panel. And then we'll set the size of this to like 12 or something even smaller. And then we want this to be aligned to the bottom. And so we can 0 this out again. So 0, 0, 0, 0, size the content. And then for the alignment, we want it to be 0.5 and 1, like so. And then we want to actually bind these values. So for the text block, if you go to binding, let's see what I do. Bind, oops, what? Oh, hold on. What did I do? Where did that go? Yeah, so for the text, we want to bind this to the skill's name. So we just select that. For the image, we want to bind it to the image. So we can say under brush, we can say skill image. And for the description, we want to bind it to the skill's description. And then finally, the last thing we need is that little lock image to show, or like the image that shows whether it's, unlocked, locked, or purchased, basically. And so we can just add one more image, except for this one, we want to add it kind of on top of everything else. So we actually want to add this to the canvas panel, or specifically this canvas panel up here. So drag it on top of this guy, and it'll add it on top of everything else. And then we want to set it to centered. And again, we can zero that out. And then we want to set the size of this to something kind of small, like 50 by 50. And then, did I center that? Yeah. And then we want this to be 0.5. Oh, oops, I selected text. Hold on. What did I do? We want the text to be on the bottom. Oops, sorry. I didn't realize I was changing that. Okay, yeah, the text should look like this. Oops, this should just be 0 by 0. The text should look like this, anchored at the bottom, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.5, 0.5, and size to content. And then the image, which is the thing I thought I was changing, should be centered, and then 0, 0, 50, 50, and then alignment of 0.5 and 0.5, like so. And then also let's select this image, and for the opacity of it, if you search for opacity, let's set it to like 0.5. So that way we can kind of see these two images since they're kind of on top of each other. Okay, and then for this image, we need to bind it because it's going to change depending on the state of the skill, right? So if we click on this, we want to bind this brush. So we'll say create binding, like so. And then let's rename this. So it creates a function up here called getBrush0. Let's rename this to getLockedBrush, because this is kind of the brush that represents like whether it's locked or whatever. And then I like to add bindings to a binding category just to keep things organized. And then they should also really be private and const as well. So we'll do that. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. So we basically want to change the image based on like the current status of the skill. So we have access to the skill, so we can just drag that in. And we can say get status, and then we can say select, and then we can hook that up. And so the idea here, actually, we don't want to do that quite yet. We want to drag off this and say make brush from texture, like that. And then we want to drag off of this and say select, and then drag the select output into here. There we go. And now we can just select whatever image we want to use in these different states. So again, you can use your own images. I'm just going to use ones from that starter pack. So for locked, I'm going to use the t_lock. This one. For unlocked, I'm going to use t_unlocked. Or what is it called? t_locked. Oh, t_locked unlocked. And then for acquired, I think there's like a check mark. t_check. Yeah, this guy check 2, I guess. Like so. Let's see. Let's run this and just kind of get an idea of where we're at right now. So I'm going to hit play, and then hit P, and you can see we kind of got something going on here. Some things are a little bit messed up. So currently we can click any button, which we need to fix. But it is showing the correct symbols. We have an unlock symbol and a lock symbol. But we got a couple issues. So one issue is that, like, obviously we can click any of these, which is not good. We haven't done that yet though. But it looks like this text is wrapping out. So we need to set the description text to be wrapping. So let's go back to the description, and we want to set the text down here. And if we search wrap, we want to set auto wrap text to true. And now if we compile and save and run this again, that did absolutely nothing. Why did that do absolutely nothing? Oh, it's, wait, what? Oh, I think it's because we need to set this to I think we need to set the anchor point to this one. So it stretches across, and then we need to set the offset left to 0 and 0 like that. And then we want to set down here, we want to set this justification to centered. So now if we run this, okay, now our descriptions are fitting in much nicer. So now we just need to fix the enabling of the buttons so that we can't click any of them. And we also need to set the color of these as well. And some of the visibility stuff is a little broken as well. So, okay, so we can fix all that real quick. Okay, so let's do the color first. So let's select the sky. And then I don't remember which one of these it is. Let me look. Okay, so it's color and opacity. So if you see this one, if we change this, it changes the color of whatever image you have here. So we don't actually want to do that there. We want to bind to it. So we'll say create binding. And then just like we did for this one over here, let's rename this to like get blocked color. This is like the color of the image. Drag it into the binding category. Set it to private and const. And then we basically want to do the same thing we did before. So we'll drag in skill and we'll say get status. And then we'll do a select. And then we'll drag the select up there. And so now we can just select the color. So when it's acquired, it's that check mark. So we want it to be like some green color. And then when it's unlocked, we want it to be some blue color. And then when it's locked, we want it to be like red. More red, like that. Okay, so let's run this again. Play, P. Okay, so now we got our colors correct. So we need to fix the enabling of the button. So if we come back here and we select the button, we can say enabled, and we want to bind this as well. So we'll say create binding. And then inside of here, we're going to do kind of something similar again. We'll drag in skill, and we'll say get status, and then we'll do select and hook this up. And so the only time we want the button to be enabled is if it's unlocked. So we'll check unlocked. And then I'm going to drag this into the binding category, set it to private, and set it to const. And so now if we play it and we open this up, you can see this one down here is locked, and so we can't even click it, so it doesn't let us click it. But this one lets us click it. But you'll notice there's some weird thing going on. Like if I hover over the lock, it doesn't actually let me click the button. And that's like just a visibility issue, which we can fix. So I kind of waited to do this towards the end because it's kind of just easier to do this all at once. But we need to set a couple things. We need to make sure our widgets are set up correctly with the visibility. So, and it's kind of easier to do this when your widgets are all finished, which is why I was waiting to the end. So let's just go through all of our widgets real quick. Actually, we might only have to do it to this one. So let's go to the designer tab. And so what we want to do here is we want to select everything. So if you shift click, it will select everything. And we want to search for visibility up here. And we want to set all of them to not hit self-testable, or not hit testable, self only. And this will make it so that the mouse won't actually collide with them when you're clicking. But the only exception to this is the button, because we actually want to be able to click the button. And so for this one, we want to set it to visible. And so now if we compile save and we play it and we press P, you can see even when our mouse is over top of the little unlock symbol, we can still click the button, which is what we want. Okay, so things are moving along pretty good. Let's see. The next thing we need to do is make it so that when we click on one of these, it actually unlocks it, and we need to hook up our points as well. Let's do the points because that's actually pretty easy. So that's in the skill tree widget, the designer tab, and then it's this one right here. So if we just click this one and hit bind, we can bind it to our skill tree component points, just like that. Compile, save, play, and there we go. So now it says 0. And let's also add the button that allows us to give ourselves points real quick. So let's go to our first person character. Let's just take a second. We don't need to actually create a binding for this, since it's kind of like a debug thing anyways. So just somewhere down here, we'll say input key. I'm going to use the numpad like plus button. You can literally use any button you want, but this is, kind of just for testing basically. And so whenever we press this, we want to drag in our skill tree component and we want to add a point to it. So we just need to make a function real quick to add a point, which is really simple. So we'll just say function add point. And so normally you'd call add point, whenever your character levels up or whenever he does something that, you want to give him a skill tree point, you would just call this function. But, all we need to do here really is just drag in points and say increment. And now I'll just go ahead and give him a point. And so back over here, we can just say add point, that up. And so now if we press play, we open this guy up and we press the plus button on the numpad. You can see it just adds a point every time we do it. And so now we need to hook up these buttons so that when we click it, it actually unlocks it. And we pretty much already wrote most of that code, I think. So it shouldn't be that difficult. So let me go back to my other project so I can reference this real quick. Skill widget, designer, 1 second. Okay, so go to the skill widget and go to the graph and then find the button over here on the left. So this is the button, and then say on clicked, and that'll give us this event. We can just go ahead and delete all this crap because we don't need it. So when the button is clicked, which means when they click this skill, we want to say skill. We want to call this request acquire because again, like we're only really requesting it because we don't really know at this point whether or not they can purchase it or not because they might not have enough points. So we're calling request acquire. And if you remember, I think we already wrote this function. Yeah. All this does is it calls that on acquire request event dispatcher. And that is being listened to inside of our inventory component, just to kind of recap again real quick. So if you go to the inventory component, or you don't have to, but I'm just showing you. Where is the inventory? Or I keep saying inventory component because I just did an inventory tutorial. So I probably have said that like 1,000 times. But if I say inventory component or inventory, I meant the skill trees component. So sorry that I keep saying that. So in the skill tree component, it calls this, where is it? On skill acquired. So this function gets called whenever that button gets pressed, right? Eventually this function gets called. And so this is where it says, okay, do we have enough points? Yes, we do. Okay, let's set it to acquired, and then let's set it to unlocked. And so that's what happens when you press the button ultimately. And that all happens when you call this function. All right, so let's give this a try. Hit play, P, select this guy. Oh, that didn't work. Let me add a breakpoint here and see what's going on. Oh, it's because I don't have any, so I didn't add any points. So let me remove that breakpoint. So let's open this up and then we'll add a point. We'll add a couple points and then we'll click it. And there you go. So it unlocked it, or it set it to acquire, and then it unlocked the next one. And if I try to double jump now, you can see I actually double jumped, and that's because it's calling into our apply skill function. And then also if I select this one, you can see it now unlocks this one, and I can walk around like super fast, right? So I think, did I forget anything? And it's subtracting from the points, right? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay. So yeah, that's basically the end of the tutorial. Um, like I was showing you guys before, like you could very easily add more of these. Like there's nothing stopping you from adding more of these. All you have to do is in your first person character inside of this init skills, you just have to create more skills and set them up to do whatever you want. And then inside of apply skill function, you just do whatever you want to do, right? So I just have 2 examples here for you guys, but hopefully you can kind of derive what to do if you want to add more skills, because it's kind of dependent on your game, like what skills you want to have. But that's essentially the gist of it. And every time you say add new skill array and you give it a new category, it will just add a new category. So you'll get agility, and then you'll get weapons and health, and you can just keep adding more, and it'll just keep adding them to this thing here. So yeah, that's basically the end of the tutorial. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I also have a Discord channel if you guys want to join there. It's a bunch of game devs. And I also have a Patreon if you want to support me there. That's always super appreciated. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video.